Welcome to A Photographer's Life, the channel that takes you behind the curtain into the world of professional real estate photography. Join us now for an episode with some of America's premier real estate photographers. Today's broadcast comes from a recent Zoom meeting of Real Estate Photographers of America. This discussion is led by REPA Director Alan Blakely. We hope you enjoy the show. If you do, please let us know by liking this episode and subscribing to this channel. Now, on with the show.
Okay, we'd like to welcome everyone to this inaugural Zoom meeting of Real Estate Photographers of America. I want to start this meeting by just welcoming everyone who's logged on so far. Hopefully we'll have more participation. This meeting will be hosted as a YouTube video on our new channel, which is called A Photographer's Life. Now, at A Photographer's Life, you'll also find recordings and videos from the AIAP, Association of Independent Architectural Photographers, as well as Aerial Drone Photographers of America. And along with those Zoom meetings, we also have playlists which will include interviews with individual photographers. The one that's sitting there right now is an interview I did 2 weeks ago with AIAP photographer Michael Dressler, who is a very well-known architectural photographer in Columbia, South Carolina. A lot of good information in that video. You can also find the podcasts on most every podcast channel at this point. So that's the housekeeping up front. From here, we just want to start in. And prior to starting the meeting, I asked the question about how things were going generally, and a couple of you volunteered. JT, let's go back to you if we can, if you've got a second to talk to us and just kind of give us an idea of where your business is, right here, February 19th.
Okay, so I was similarly surprised by the people I've spoken with that, especially down south, Southern California, Florida, whatnot, that said, oh yeah, 21 was my greatest year. A couple of those indicate it was because, well, they offer 360, doing true 360 views on the, and that was what saved their business.
Okay.
I'm in the greater Detroit area. I serve all of Michigan, but predominantly Southeast Michigan, the Detroit, Ann Arbor metro area.
Right.
This market struggles because I've got a lot of realtors, brokers that'll list $15 million properties and think Canon Coolpix is just fine. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So it's a tough market here in Detroit. It's not like going to Charleston or out toward Michael's area potentially.
Yeah.
But as far as the business, it definitely dropped off. I had 3 regular brokers that do the majority of my business with me. Come mid-year, I would say certainly by mid-April, stuff just stopped for about 3 months, just stopped.
Okay.
Absolutely came to a screeching halt. Then I started to get a couple of calls again coming back in September and October. It died again. Started seeing some more activity in December and then January and February. Again, it's fortunately I have a alternative source of revenue. Otherwise I'd be drowning in stuff right now because it's just not that healthy. It's showing signs of life, which is good. I think some of the other indicators I'm seeing with regards to COVID and the fact that maybe as early as April we'll have herd immunity finally. So I'm optimistic, but it's definitely down. And I would say for me personally, it's down 70% still.
Okay. In general, for those of you who are on the meeting right now, are brokerages your primary clientele? Or is it a mix of brokers and independent agents and other things? Can you give me an idea of what your clientele is right now or has been in the past couple of years?
I'll offer comment, then I'll step away.
Sure.
I look at this annually. My customer mix changes year by year.
Okay.
As I mentioned, commercial tends to be heaviest in the early winter months. Then it shifts to residential. As far as brokers, one-offs, FSBOs, I would say the bread and butter, 50% comes from the repeat customers.
Okay.
The rest of that is, I see them once or twice a year, real estate agents or brokers. The last 2 years, what I saw was, by surprise, very high percentage of for sale by owners.
Interesting.
We're typically people in the 500,000 and up market. So in my area, I would say the median property is not 300,000. Very common house price is 250 to 300, and that'll be your 2-floor, 3-2 house. And what I found is that there was a dearth. There was, for anything much further south of 300, they couldn't get me out there fast enough. They'd already sold it. The farther north of 400 you went, there was actually a slowdown and a little bit of a surplus. And I would have more and more owners calling me because their houses were sitting on the market 12, 18 months, and they needed to do something. I actually did a shoot for a VP of GM Powertrain and his wife, who was a high-end VP of a marketing organization. They could tell me, we've been on the market this long. This is who else in our neighborhood's been on the market. This is what they're asking. We think it's a little bit too soon to change it. You know, they've done their homework, but they were classic example of $800,000 house. It's not seeing the traffic, and so they're calling out a professional photographer.
Okay.
And I saw a lot of FSBO activity as a result of that.
Interesting. Michael, what kind of mix do you have there in your market? You're in Breckenridge, Colorado.
It's turning more and more into a VRBO and Airbnb market for me.
Oh, interesting.
They find me on Google and they call me, and 90% of them don't balk at the price. Some of them do, and they go away. But that's become the majority of my business lately. My real estate stuff has really dropped off, I think for a couple reasons. One, a lot of my good clients are getting older and they're retiring.
Okay.
And are moving away. And so I don't have those anymore. And the young ones all seem to be happy with the kids out there that charge $80, you know, or $50. And I'm not going to do it for that.
Okay.
Part of the problem also has been COVID.
Ron, I see you've joined us here. I want to ask you to comment on the same question about your mix of clientele at the present time compared to maybe a year or two ago. What are you seeing right now?
Yeah, you're talking to Rob, right?
Rob, yes. I'm sorry.
My business is interesting. I do a lot of stuff, and I'm on the higher end of the real estate pricing model, as many of you probably are. And so even in pre-COVID times in a good year, I probably only have half a dozen really good clients that give me regular work. And then throughout the year, I have a lot of these one-off people that either decide it was too expensive or they just don't sell a lot of homes or whatever.
Okay.
But actually our market is really, really, really hot in the Northwest right now. Everybody's wanting to get out of Seattle, getting out of Southern California, and they're moving up to North Idaho, Eastern Washington area to kind of get away from the crowds. So real estate's actually been pretty busy lately.
You know, this may or may not be applicable to the question, but over the years, and I can't say 2020 is a fair reflection of this, but I'll tell you, a solid quarter of my business comes from one of two reasons. We had a photographer out already. We think we need to have a professional photographer right now.
There you go.
That's a pretty popular one.
That's what we want to hear.
The other one is, you're the only one I called that returned my call.
And isn't that surprising? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm, by day, I'm a director of sales operations. So I run a national sales team.
Okay.
And one of the classic things in sales is you have to show up. And that's where a lot of those phone calls come in. Now, right now, I'm trying to transition to this is the full-time primary business. But, you know, you have to show up. You know, just answer. I cannot tell you how many times, either because somebody else did a poor job or they simply didn't answer their phone, I get the business.
I think that is an excellent point to make because I get that too. From nationally from architectural clients. I'll ask how they found me, or how they came to call me, or why they're giving me the job. And I'm just astounded when I find out I'm the only one who returned their phone call, or replied their email with a quote. That's just crazy to me.
I think it's great because it gives me
Yeah.
a quarter of my business, but seriously, there's money left on the table.
There's a couple of things I wanted to talk about. There's a couple of things I wanted to talk with you about that we've kind of found out on a national level. There's kind of a good news, bad news. Let's start with the bad news first. This has been a record year for sales of equipment to people who are considering jumping into the photography market. Now, I suspect that the bulk of those will go into the portrait and wedding market and dilute that market even further. But I have a feeling that there's some of those who are going to kind of trickle into the real estate market as well, and their competition is going to be strictly price, because they're the newbies. And so the differentiation then is on the quality of the product that we offer. And that's the competitive point right there. And we're not going to want to compete on price. And so we have to offer something else there. The good news is that there are more people hitting the Google local listings than ever before when looking for photographers. The search for real estate photographers on Google local returns has really shot through the roof over the past 12 months. Now, for those who are going to be listening to this later and watching this, we've just got a handful of us here right now, but hopefully you all know about claiming that Google local listing, where when somebody types in, real estate photographer, that Google is going to look at who's listed locally or in that local search area when they're identifying the location of where the search comes from, and then bring you up in that little sidebar box, which shows with the map who's listed in that local area. Is everyone familiar with that and up to speed on that, Michael?
Yeah. I've had that going for quite a while.
Okay. I think that's going to become more and more important. Now, one thing along with that is that you're going to need to have some reviews that people will be willing to do that give you that 5-star rating. And so I would recommend that you, to your best customers, you send out a request. And Google has, if you go into your Google account there, I don't know exactly where the page is, but there is a request link where you can send that to your customers and say, will you please let the world know how you feel about my photography, or would you be comfortable sharing your experience with my photography on social media? And then that will automatically populate to your Google local listing. And that is going to be huge. Another point along with that, and JT, you alluded to the fact that you're going to be reworking your website. Could I maybe just kind of encourage everybody to take a second look at how your website comes up as a search return, and just make sure that if you were the guy searching or the woman searching for a real estate photographer, that the title and description is compelling enough to get you to click on that link. Any thoughts on that? Has anybody had experience with that so far?
One thing I would recommend when doing that is if you are logged into Google, like you're using Chrome, right? Make sure you log out and you do it as independent search. Also have somebody outside your region, because if you search as yourself, it's going to feed you back yourself.
Yes, it will. It will give you tainted returns.
Yep. The last time I did this, certainly made sure to sign out. I also had a friend in South Africa do a search for me. I will tell you, page one came up almost exactly the same as mine.
Okay.
Yay, I'm in South Africa as a photographer. That was great. Granted, he was searching the Detroit market, but still. But the other thing that goes with that, and I've done this for a number of small businesses and my own blogs and different things, is you need to be active. You don't have to be extensive, maybe have a blog, but you need to have some fresh content, at least weekly, going up there. Because that alone, there's another JT Peterson over in Europe. He's a microbiologist, very well published individual.
Okay.
And at one point I set up jtpeterson.net and started blogging twice a week and doing reviews and whatnot. And inside 90 days, I had completely pushed him back 3 pages. I clobbered the first 2 pages.
Oh, interesting.
It only took 90 days of regular publishing.
The Google local listing also will prompt you to post an update on a weekly basis. You'll get an email and saying, do you need to post an update? Have you posted your COVID policy yet? Those kinds of things. Those are important. And that weekly update generates huge traffic. Now, I don't do a lot in my local market, and so I honestly haven't paid a lot of attention to the weekly updates, but when I do, I see a bump, and sometimes I see a big bump. And so all it is a photograph with, some news item or feature item or some type of service information, that kind of thing. And those are huge. I wanted to give you kind of the breakdown of what we're seeing across the United States as far as the people looking for a real estate photographer and where they're looking. Okay. So Google is the first. I mean, they're going to do a Google search, and it's usually in terms of real estate photographer and then the location. That is the primary search that they're going to be looking at. The next one, which I found kind of fascinating, was Facebook. They're going to look on Facebook for a recommendation for a real estate photographer. That's totally different than the architecture or aerial photography market. That's unique to the real estate group. From Facebook, then we kind of have a toss-up between Instagram and Pinterest, which was also a surprise to me. Of the demographics that we're able to extract as far as who's looking at those things and who's looking, it's predominantly women who are looking for a real estate photographer. And I can't differentiate whether those are realtors, whether they're owners, that kind of thing. That's kind of tough to differentiate. But one thing I can tell you is that there is a large percentage of other photographers looking at your websites, and we do see a fair amount of search traffic through the real estate photography directory that are other photographers. Just kind of scoping out the competition is my idea about it, because the domains that they're coming from on those, the domains and also the names, if it's a Gmail account, that they do have some attribute that leads us to believe that those are photographers. So those are kind of just some clues about demographically where people are looking and who's looking. Real estate wise, and as I've talked with people in the real estate profession, they see more movement for photography being in the upper end of things for people of your caliber, that it's going to be in the upper end, the commercial and the high end residential, rather than in the low end residential. And by saying that, that also leads to the requirement that your website and the things that you show on social media be a very high caliber photography that set you apart from the rest of the crowd. I have people here in my local market. I live in Utah, and I live in a little resort community north of Salt Lake City. But in the Salt Lake City market, there are people charging everywhere, for an MLS listing from $50 to say $500. That's the range on an MLS. Now the work that I do on a residential listing usually is when the owner brings me in, or a broker where they really need something that sets them apart. But a lot of them also have in-house photography, and that's yet another hurdle to overcome, especially in some of the resort areas where you are, Michael.
Yeah, that's happened.
Berkshire Hathaway is famous for having in-house photography, and also Sotheby's. So that's kind of another hurdle. You've just got to be able to show them that you're different and better, and definitively so. So that's kind of the point of that whole conversation. Any concerns that you might want to discuss with other photographers that come to mind at this point? Is there? I'd kind of like to hear what's on your mind. That's an interesting market that just didn't exist a couple of years ago, really, because people were just taking shots with their phone, and now it's become so competitive, and the volume of inventory has increased to the point where you've got to have something excellent to set yourself apart. I did a shoot a year ago in Park City at my full rate for an owner of a ski property, simply to put on VRBO. And he was happy to do it. And of course, it was a small investment in the big scheme of things. But I'm just wondering if maybe that's something that in your website and in your blog or whatever, in your website description or anything like that, if VRBO or Airbnb maybe is something that is contextual, so that people can find you for these things. Because I don't
did that.
Yeah, they're not going, they're not going to the real estate people and asking, what photographer should I hire? They're looking for somebody themselves.
I don't know. Some months ago, I rewrote my homepage,
Mm-hmm.
and I stuck VRBO and Airbnb in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I also did. I signed up with Airbnb to be one of their certified photographers, and went through their little weird ass course.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a certain way they want things done, and it was simple enough to learn. But then when I actually got a call for a job, it was over 100 miles away, and it paid $200.
Yeah.
And a little bit of mileage. But then you also have to do this, I don't know, it's like a floor plan that takes
Right.
another hour.
Yeah.
And I said, no, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a number of agencies that are trying to hire photographers to do that kind of thing, and we see them hitting the real estate photography website on a regular basis, and scraping emails to try to find photographers that they can contact. And so you probably have all had that contact at this point by one or the other of them, and they don't pay very much. They're difficult to work with. And so working independently, I think, is going to always be your best choice on a situation like that.
One of the things, JT, and you said, Alan, I think is so important. I mean, I get people call me and I answer the phone, and they are so surprised that I answer the phone that they mention that. I mean, you're the first one that answered the phone. My God, what are you doing?
Yeah, or if I miss, it's as soon as I possibly can.
It's just crazy that people don't do that. I don't understand it. But
let me just interject just really quick here, and I'll get back to your thought there, Michael. But there is an app online called Speechelo, SPEECHELO. It's a free app. It has an artificial intelligence of voices that you can choose from. You type in what you want, and I use that as my answering machine. That's the voice that you hear on my answering machine. It's this sophisticated lady who answers as if I'm a big company, and it gives you this information, and it sounds very convincing because I can't answer my phone all the time, nor can my wife, who works with me as a stylist. And so if it goes to voicemail, I want to make sure they know that I'm the real deal. And so it's a free service. So, take a look at it. They won't be happy for me sending you for the free service, but
What was the name of it again, Alan?
it's called Speech-a-lo. Now they'll try to get you to sign up for their pro package, which has more voices, but there's enough variability in the voices that they give you for free that I think you can come up with something that sounds really polished. And it takes a little tweaking, and you have to learn how to punctuate so that the voice will pause and take breaths and things like that. But there are some male voices and female voices, and even a child's voice if you chose to go that route. But they sound like you've hired voice talent. In fact, I had somebody ask me where I had found the voice talent for my answering machine, and I didn't tell them. If you can't answer the phone, that will be an impressive answer that I think will boost you up just a little bit in their eyes as far as your credibility. I'm sorry, Michael, I defer back to you.
Google, that reminder to update your Google site every week.
Yeah.
What I've been trying to do is to create different scenarios. Like right now, I'm working on one called the retrospective of my 17 years in commercial photography.
Okay.
And I'm going back and I posted my very first shot I ever took in 2003, which I'm not real proud of, but it's not that bad. And I keep moving forward, and I try to describe what I was doing, why I was doing that, and I've been doing that like every 2 or 3 days, and I think that's helping a lot.
We started probably a year and a half ago, making a concerted effort to post on Instagram and on LinkedIn. Now that's LinkedIn, I think, is probably not a real good fit for real estate, but for architecture it is. I don't know, it won't hurt you to be there, and you probably should be anyway. But we do flights where we have, we post every day for a week or every day for 2 weeks, and then we'll lay off for just a little bit. And that kind of goes back to, I worked in advertising for a while, and there's some strategies to the way you do advertising as far as whether, the frequency and the reach that you gain by certain frequencies and things like that. But I saw a huge bump, and I saw a huge bump in clients that I couldn't reach any other way. Clients that I had mailed to for years, all of a sudden were contacting me because they were seeing work that I was posting, every day or, every 2 weeks or something like that. I would probably, if you've got the opportunity to sit down with somebody in real estate, now, Michael, that's easy for you, and just ask, where are people looking that are looking for real estate in your particular market? And in order to then roll that into where are they looking for real estate photographers, I think that there's some commonality there, especially with those who are selling by themselves. And in this market where there's so little inventory and prices are increasing and interest rates are staying so incredibly low, I think there's going to be more inclination for people to try to sell on their own. And then the discount brokerages that are coming into the markets, that it may be an open door for real estate photographers who do great work and charge a little more or a lot more.
I think you're right, Alan, about LinkedIn. I do LinkedIn, Facebook, what else? Twitter, and Google, those 4 religiously.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps. I Houzz, H-O-Z-Z.
That's a good point. I didn't bring that up, but that is an excellent fit for the real estate market.
I go in and do, they allow you to do specials, or sales. And what I do is mark it up and then bring it down to my regular price. I know that's not very ethical, but I don't care. And I do those. I try to keep them running so that maybe it'll generate some interest.
Mm-hmm.
And they give out awards. You know,
They do.
I mean, all you have to do is get somebody to review you once or twice a year, and they'll give you a new reward or a new award.
Right.
So you can. I've got like, I don't know, 6 or 7 of them that I put on my email as part of my email signature.
One other thing with House that I need to mention is that there is a real estate. I mean, our group has an affiliated badge, and I don't know how many have claimed it in this group. But okay, so you know about it, but you have to go into your profile and go under affiliations, and you can claim that real estate photography badge, which shows you as a certified real estate photographer with the group. To me, that's a huge thing, because that will set you apart.
Well, I've got a link, yeah, but where do you get that certified part? I haven't seen that.
If you use the code for the to link back to the real estate site, to the group, it does say certified member, and I'll send you that, Art, Michael, so that you can stick that in if you want to. JT, you had a comment.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about the different sources. You know, it's not meant as any form of puffery. I've sent you email on this in the past, but I've all but given up on Facebook. I've had a Facebook page for years. Now I won't claim to be up there continuously updating it, but I've run ads on Facebook. I cannot, when I remember, I ask people, you know, how they find me, where they'd find me. Google's obviously number one for generic purposes. I can't say in 7 years that anybody has come to me from Facebook, not a single soul. I don't pursue LinkedIn because I don't believe it's a real good fit. I've used it for other things with good success, but I've also got to manage some conflicts of interest in that avenue. But the other places I register or list, REPAI is the one that routinely generates the most identifiable leads for me. Generally, they've come to me pre-qualified. That's one of the things I love about maintaining an active web presence.
Yeah.
Is I would say 90% of the time, they're pre-qualified. They're calling, they've looked at the portfolio, they've already seen me. You know, it's generally pretty clear when they come from REPAI, but they've already seen the portfolio. They're pre-qualified. I used to post my pricing. I'm not doing that currently. I don't know if I'll resume that or not. So when they called, it's like, oh, I need package D, and you know, here's my credit card. It's been a great way of driving business.
That's
great.
That's great.
I really have found REPAI is paid for itself more than any of the other registries or services I participate in.
I'm glad to hear that. We do. We see huge traffic through there, and I know that a certain percentage of that converts, and so it's nice to hear that back, that that you're seeing that. That is, we promote that, and the realtors get tired of our direct mail, I think, but we promote that to realtors, both commercial and residential, on a regular basis with direct mail. And it goes out to roughly 40,000 agents and brokers. And with the basic message is, this is where you're going to find the best photography in America for real estate. And so it's an easy thing for them to do. And they've actually been fairly loyal, the ones that have bought into that. And there are certain brokerages that will use that directory, the REPAI directory, everywhere throughout the country to find photographers. So I'm glad to hear
that
it's
might
working
explain. I got at least one lead from CBRE out of Chicago that way.
Okay.
I've had CBRE from Toronto and elsewhere, but I know the one in Chicago at least came via REPAI.
That is one that heavily uses the directory. And I don't know if it's in any internal literature or something that's recommended within the company. I've not been able to discern that, but they are regular users, and we see their traffic coming through almost on a daily basis. So that's good.
They do talk. I think it was a Toronto one I got because the person calling had spoken to their counterpart in Chicago.
Okay.
So they do talk amongst themselves,
Okay.
at least within that business.
That's great to know. A couple of things that I wanted to talk about, and I think there's going to be some attrition in our business over the next little while. We saw it with the recession in 08, 09. And those that are going to be able to kind of float to the top, if you will, are not the guys that are charging $50. It's the ones who are doing great work. And that's where this group, I think, has the distinct advantage. I would like to be able to show more great work on the REPAI website. I get a little bit of input, and we've kind of held off on pulling the trigger on repopulating all the images and things like that. And we kind of like to put together some type of a showcase that takes you beyond the landing page, where you can look at individual photographers. Please don't hesitate to shoot me something.
I've wondered about that.
You know, if you've got something special, send it to me.
Because the stuff I sent you is 6 years old at best. I haven't sent you anything since. I wasn't aware I could send you stuff for the rotating, the bumper rotation per se. So,
yeah,
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, we've not done a lot with that as far as rotating it. I'd like to think that those things make people come and go, and we generate more traffic with it. The truth is we don't. What generates the traffic is them clicking. The biggest traffic conversion that we get is somebody who searches for a real estate photographer in a specific area and then goes directly to that directory page. They don't go to the home page. And that's where we have the greatest conversion from searches. So real estate photographer, Oregon, say, for example, that is a better search return than just general real estate photographers. Interesting. Mr. Kordak saying that he's not seeing any loyalty from clients, that he says if you offer drones, et cetera, brokers will give you the business. Is aerial photography a part of people's business here?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's been actually a fun one. 5 years ago, I started getting the first phone calls.
Okay.
And hey, do you do it? And a lot of it was kick to the tires. So this is 5 or 6 years ago. And nobody would pay for it. And they certainly, once you gave them, I had maybe 4 or 5 times a year. That year I had frank discussions, and well, why, would you? Well, I would, but I don't know that my market would support it. Well, what would you charge? Well, they said, yeah, you're right. End of call.
Mm-hmm.
The next year I had more phone calls, and I had my first actual sale, commercial. It's like $350, and I outsourced it. I did 100% to a local drone operator. So I was happy to get it as part of the package. And I thought, the phone calls are starting to get a little bit more serious here. I think that off season, I think, I'm going to go do the training, get my license, get my equipment, get insured, and I want to be ready for the market. This is 3 years ago now. And I got my license in like February. I was fully insured in March, and I got my first paying shoot residentially 2 weeks after that. I will say I've done more than enough to pay for the Mavic Pro that I use maybe 3-4 times over.
Mm-hmm.
It is something that, I have had some phone calls where a couple of customers, they only call me out for a drone. I haven't done any terrestrial shoots for them. It's only been, hey, come out and shoot a drone of the farm, shoot a drone of this bar on a peninsula that I'm trying to sell. Blah, blah, blah. So it's a valuable add-on. It has paid for itself. At least in my area, if all you're going to do within 30 miles is call me out for that, it's going to be $179. I may bump that. I give it about a $50 break if it's part of a conventional package.
Mm-hmm.
There are some local guys that's all they do is drone and drone video.
Yeah.
Video is a whole nother topic we could get into today, but
Right.
the drone has certainly been, it's gotten me some business where I wouldn't have gotten it otherwise.
Okay.
I am looking though to replace it and move a little bit upscale to the later gen Mavic Pro. I'm not going to go into, an octocopter or any of that. The market doesn't bear that. I'm not interested. But I do want to get something higher quality than the Mavic Pro.
Okay. All right. I will just say from my business that I've been using a drone now for, I think, 6 years. And the reason I did it was because that helicopter time was becoming so prohibitive. And for my commercial clients, it was a little hard for them to swallow, $850 to $1,000 an hour to take a Bell Jet Ranger up. And which is, I understand that. And so I've used one and integrated it as part of my creative fee, which is, it's a different world than charging for a real estate property. But it's part of the package. I offer it if they ask for it. And it depends on the airspace, whether or not it's even possible to do it. There's a lot of restricted airspace situations where I cannot get a waiver, and I let them know that. So, we can rent the helicopter, or we can just forego having drone shots.
I smile over that. I've got a local competitor. He posts right on his website, he will not shoot within 5 miles of an airport, period. And a lot of, like this one I just threw up here, it's amazing what 15 feet off the ground will do. I mean, this is dead flat land here where the shot is.
Right.
This is not Breckenridge. This is dead flat here like a pancake. And 15 feet completely changes perception of the property.
Sure.
And I do market to my customers when they should or shouldn't. Typically, if it's going to be flat like this, unless there's a reason to use it, don't. But if you're somebody like this one, I've had a number of marinas that I've shot.
Right.
I've done some true overhead aerials. One I had to stitch 46 images. I had to fly a grid.
Okay.
And that was a huge one. But they're using that as a map when they're looking to sell space. Here it is. I think this is it. You're only seeing a quarter of the image, but they're looking at to show customers where their berth is going to be, things like that.
And I think in a commercial situation, that's going to be a whole lot more important, showing what the property context is. And I'll say I shoot in the Salt Lake Valley, which a lot of the stuff is going to be in the flight path of Salt Lake International Airport, and I'm able to, I have to allow the time, but I'm able to get the clearance in nearly every situation to fly at an altitude that they approve. And that is not going to be 400 feet. It may be 92 feet or something like that, but I can still get the drone in the air. I can still do the work. And so it's not an impossibility. But I think that is such a value added proposition to real estate photography. If you can say, yeah, I've got a drone, and we'll add that in at this kind of a fee. That's huge, rather than bringing somebody else on board.
Can I ask a slightly different direction before we wrap up?
Sure.
And that is video. I've completely replaced my equipment this season. Made a major investment. The Canon 5D Mark III that I had for 6 years. Loved the camera, but when I started looking at doing video, it was woefully lacking by modern standards. Then I started looking at modern equipment and realizing that the exposure range was dramatically improved in the last 7, 8, 10 years of technology.
Right.
But I'm curious how, for this group, how much video is starting to poke into the business.
I used to do a lot of video.
Okay.
But I had an editor out in West Virginia that would edit it all, put it together, made it look beautiful for $35 or $40.
I haven't had any, but tying back to Alan's earlier comment about opportunity is going to lie in the higher end of the market, I definitely agree with that. I price myself So I'm not shooting $125,000 wonders. I really don't
Mhm.
want to. So I price higher accordingly, and I do deliver a, not $50 deliverable. But what I'm also finding with a handful of my repeat customers is they're focused on doing their day job, and they're not thinking about where to go. They're not going to come to me and tell me where my business needs to go. Maybe they saw Bob had this happen, and so they'll ask me whether I do that or not. But it's up to me to come up with the deliverable and assess where the market is and what I think I can get them to buy. And right now I am seeing, especially for higher end properties, for me, that's going to be the 800,000 plus, video clearly is an opportunity. But I've done some editing. I've done a couple of decent little videos, but specific to real estate, that's its own little niche. And I was just curious how folks were looking at it.
I just wanted to mention that for me personally, I don't do any video. I partner with a videographer and who does it really well and who edits it amazingly. And I mean, honestly, you can tell by the color of my hair, I don't want to say how old I am. I don't want to learn anything new. And so that's not what I do best. And so I'll stick with still photography, and I'll let this other fellow who's, almost 30 now, I'll let him do the videography on all the editing and put the music bed in and all that kind of stuff. And it works out. It's a great partnership for me. And I know that there's other photographers within REPAI who do the same thing, but there are those who are able to handle it all. And hats off to them. Carl's just joined us. I'm curious, Carl, what's your take on this about video? How does that affect your business?
Well, more and more people are. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Good. More and more clients want video, in addition to still imagery and sometimes the 360 tours. And my brand and my price point is intentionally pretty high because I'm probably in everyone's age group here that I see on screen. So what I do with video is since 2012, I've either partnered with someone directly, another photographer / videographer, because I found that for these more expensive listings, it takes more resources and more hands to really do a proper job of it. So in many cases, I'll either partner directly with them or else, like I shot a house this summer that was multi-million-dollar project. And so I hired, I had a second assistant shooting detail shots and also had a videographer working independently of me. I kind of told him what I wanted, but he just went and did it. And we've done a lot of projects together, so I know he's very capable. And so that way, I mark it up and I pay him directly and then I bill the client separately. But these are not the, $500 and smaller projects. I mean, this job was over $6,000 for roughly, I had half day in on my own and then a very full day with three of us to create the end result that they needed, the deliverables. And I did a $9 million spec house in Greenwich on the coast last year that was, myself and then another second shooter. And we had to deliver. We shot it on a Friday, had to deliver on Monday. Worked all weekend to get that accomplished because of all the, it was 200 and something images they wanted. I mean, it's much more than a normal listing. And they wanted awards, they wanted magazine quality stuff. They had actually hired another real estate photographer that they typically use to shoot it the standard way, but they wanted something much more editorial and magazine ready. So that's why I got picked because of another recommendation. And again, another project that I think it tapped out at about $7,000 in all. So I'm doing much more selective work. I'm lucky to be able to do that. And because they have the budgets, I can hire somebody. My question to you, Alan, is actually, do you mark it up or do you just allow this person to charge directly, or how do you handle that part of it?
I mark it up like you do. I pay the videographer I work with. He charges me on a day rate basis, and then he charges me on a per minute edited basis. Mm-hmm. And so I have a pretty good idea going in. If the client said we need a 10-minute finished presentation of this property, I have a good idea going in what it's going to cost me to have him come, and then I incorporate that in my package. And then, it's marked up. So typically it's 25 to 50% is where my markup comes in such a situation like that. Nice. And so if I get into a home, say where, well, I shot a project with him, the last one I can think of, where having the two of us there and working and producing the video, it billed at $7,500. But you brought up an interesting term, which I think is probably important, and that's magazine quality. And that's been a search term that I've used, and that I see a few real estate photographers using, and that I think is appealing in the market is if a person is searching for a real estate photographer and they see that phrase. I mean, I had a standalone real estate photography website for about 6 months or a year, and I had to shut it down because it got more traffic than I could deal with. But it basically was, I was just repurposing a lot of the work that I had done on an editorial basis, and calling it magazine quality real estate photography. Which also brings up a point that was in the interview that's posted on the YouTube channel that I did with Brian Dressler, who is a member of AIAP. He talks about lens choices being the difference between what people perceive as a real estate photograph and what they perceive as an editorial or architecture photograph. And I know that the inclination in a lot of situations, especially with the low end, is to go for that 17 millimeter lens and shoot everything with it. Countertops look like aircraft carriers, and things are kind of ridiculous. And Brian's point was he tries to use as long a lens as possible in a situation so that it still conveys what the room is about, but it also has that ability for the viewer to actually get into that space. Because when you see a shot taken with a 17 millimeter lens, unless you're a master at it, it's obvious that that's not the way you see the room or the house or anything like that. When I've taught architectural photography, I teach at Santa Fe workshops once in a while, and the term I use is the cone of consciousness that we need to consider when we look at something. There's an area that's kind of cone shaped that we're really conscious of, and that's where our attention is, and that's where we're seeing detail and things. We're seeing other things on the periphery, and so I try to make my lens choices based on that cone of consciousness, and it's not 17 millimeters. I mean, once in a while it is, but it hardly ever is. And so getting back to where I started on this with that magazine quality photography, I think people perceive a higher level of photography in portfolios where everything's not shot super wide, where there's
so true.
Some really deliberate lens choices about what part of this what part of this house is meaningful, both to me and to the architect and the interior designer. Or if I walk into this room, what is it that I'm really looking at, and how do I capture that in a still frame? So I know that's a tangent, but you, when you brought that term up, it did remind me that I think that's the way we elevate, because I think in this coming year, unless we elevate the level of our photography, that we're going to probably be squeezed out a little bit. If not, it's going to be tough going, because there's just, I see a real flood coming in April of, I've always wanted to do photography, and look, I've got this new Sony camera, and it has a really wide zoom lens, and here we go. And I'll charge $50. So
you're going to see the same thing that we saw in 2008, 9, 10, where a lot of people got laid off. This year especially, we're going to be dealing with people that have been on unemployment for a full year, almost 50 weeks or whatever they're eligible for.
Yeah.
So they've had time to kind of study and think and buy gear and pursue their passions. And there's also, I forget where I saw it, but one of the things that like the New York Times said was, here's a great side gig for you. One of them was photography.
Yes.
And real estate photography. It's like, it
we
doesn't
love
take
them.
much to get in. The barrier to entry is very low. For $1,000, you can fully equip yourself and off you go. And I think what I've seen, I've been in a professional since 1983 when I graduated RIT, and I went to, got hired out of college directly to go to Armstrong World Industries and shoot room sets and travel.
Okay.
In the dream job of all time.
Yeah.
Stayed there 16 years. But long story short, the barrier to entry back in the film days was pretty high. The cameras were expensive. Knowing how to use them, focus, everything was, I spent 4 years in college learning how to do it right. So now the camera does everything, and then you can outsource it to somewhere on the other side of the world. And for $1 a shot, you can have your HDR processed or do your Flambient or whatever. It's very efficient. It's very low entry level. And so it mostly comes down to is how fast can you do it? How cheap can you do it? And how many people can you get in your geographic area to sign you on as their provider?
You read about this topic. This concern comes up. It's not a fresh concern. And to a certain extent, it's obviously valid. But I've also made a couple other observations. Easy to get into, but surprise, surprise, there's actually real work involved in this. It's like going into real estate. The real estate agent market is very similar to this. You get an influx of people. They think this is great. And they realize it takes 90 days to get a paycheck. That's once you've actually sold something. By the way, I'm working 12 hours a day, 6 and 7 days a week. And wow, there's work involved. I will say, as somebody who hires a fair number of people, there's a fair number of people for which work is actually a problem for them. So I'm not personally really concerned. Plus, if you're going to actually stay in this market, you have to continue to improve your skills. You can't be that guy that comes in and, okay, I got my Sony A65 used for $200. I got a $400 1635 type lens, and hey, I'm off with one speed light. That gets you going, and that gets you some initial stuff. But if you want to turn those customers into repeat customers, you see year to year, if you want to continue improving, you're going to continue to invest heavily, both in skills as well as your marketing, as well as the equipment. And most people aren't going to do that. So there'll be a flash in the pan. They'll be there. I'm literally not concerned about somebody like that robbing my 3 strong regulars. Not worried in the least. When you look at the quality workmanship, especially at the $50, $200 level. Yeah, and Michael and I had this discussion 7 years ago when I initially was looking at starting this. And, to Michael's point, there was a certain point where he said, hey, JT, how much, there's a limit to what Michael was going to share because, there's time and money. And I didn't blame him one bit. I appreciated all the input he gave me at the time. But no, I'm not worried about the Johnny come lately to this. They generally won't last. If they are doing it as a alternative to a regular day job, do the math, especially if you're starting out. I'm just now, after 7 years, starting to see $4,000 and $5,000 jobs come along. Certainly by piece count, the vast majority of my revenue comes from doing $250 wonders. And so I'm constantly looking at completely changing my workflow right now from a productivity standpoint, because I've done the math. if I want to make my current income plus, I can't do it the way I've been doing it.
Yeah, I think a year from now, we'll be having a completely different conversation. I wanted to welcome June here, who's a photographer from Los Angeles. He's significantly younger than most of us here.
And I apologize, June. Hi. I've got to step away, folks, but welcome to the party, June.
All right, I appreciate that. And Julie's joined us here too. And I just wonder, Julie, can you speak to the same question? Or I'll have you unmute there. And we haven't heard from a woman's voice yet today. And so we're anxious to hear from you.
Okay. Well, I'm Julie from Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been doing real estate. I'm primarily real estate photography. I've been doing it for about 10 years and full-time for probably 6 or 7 years. Lucky enough to have a thriving business, support a family on it. And I do a little bit of, I do some builder photography, so not so much architectural, but I do a handful of stuff for builders and some for some commercial real estate brokers as well.
Okay.
That's my story.
Okay. Do you also offer video? Is that something that you do?
I do offer video. It's not a big seller for me, but it is something that I do a fair amount of video, but primarily it's photos. I've do some 360 tours. When it's raining, I do some websites for some real estate agents, but everything that I do is concentrated on the real estate industry.
And are your clients primarily real estate professionals, or what is that mix?
It's mostly real estate agents, I would say, with a mix of, I have quite a few builder customers that I work for that they either do infill developments or just, brand new subdivisions. But I go Charlotte's a fairly big city geographically, so I go all over.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
I have a couple subs that work for me too. And that's kind of nice too, so that if I get calls and I can't make it to one location, I send other people out. And that's actually been a decent source of revenue as well.
So you sound busy. So is this year working out to be a good year for you so far?
Yes, 2020 was a great year in spite of the pandemic.
Okay.
Maybe because of the pandemic. We paused for a little while in March and April. I got a little nervous, but then it just picked right up, and our busy season was just pushed back a couple months, and it went right into the end of the year, and it really hasn't really slowed down. I've never seen a January, February like this at all. So interesting. I'm not complaining.
I have a question, Julie. Are you finding that because of the tremendous demand and the limited amount of stock, at least I'm in Connecticut, and anything they put on the market, especially in my neighborhood, sells in about 3 hours for way over listing price. So are you finding that that the market is being driven by this tremendous demand for housing, or is it more, and are they wanting the same level of quality in terms of and numbers of images? Because I've seen on some of the real estate Facebook groups that some people are saying, hey, I've never been busier, and others are saying, I don't have to do that much, or I don't have that much to do, because the real estate agents are finding that if they put, no matter what picture they put on the listing in the MLS, they're going to sell the house quickly anyway. So why spend the money?
Right.
Are you seeing that?
I'm not seeing that personally. I think I'm lucky enough to have had because I've been doing it for quite a while. I have some customers that really count on the photography for their marketing and their brand. So they want to keep that up. But I have heard that from some other photographers I've had coffee with lately, that their business has slowed down because in the Charlotte market, you're allowed to put a property on as coming soon for a week before it actually hits the market. And so they'll just put a cell phone picture up, it'll be coming soon. And basically it sells that quickly as soon as it hits the market officially. But I think it's a combination of just being with the right people that value the marketing for their brand, and just having enough variety of people that I work with. So
okay, so people are coming to you because of the level of work that you do.
I think they are, and also I get very good SEO, and I get a couple forms filled out a day and cold calls a day from people looking for help. So I'm lucky that way too. I think that's part of it.
You bring up, we talked a little bit, we've, bounced around website design and things that need to be in websites and things like that. And you bring up forms. That's not typical of our industry necessarily, to have forms on their websites, especially architectural photographers.
Okay.
Here's what I found though. I put a form on my website a month ago, and it has generated a huge return. I'm just kind of baffled by it. And so I'm wondering if, you say that that's a significant part of your website. I'm just wondering if that's something that we all probably ought to look at a little bit more seriously, is about having a form. And it goes back to that we need to make it easier for people to spend money with us. And one of those ways is we've talked earlier in this meeting about actually picking up the phone, returning the call, responding to the email, and maybe it's having that form there so that they can contact us and tell us the information. And then, the backside of that is we actually have to get back to them rather quickly on that, or that business is gone.
Right, exactly. And I do have trouble keeping up with that at times. But I put a form on there several years ago because I was tired of getting spammed from my email address being listed on my website.
Okay.
So I decided to do the form. I still get spammed through the form, but I also get some legitimate leads too. So
clarification. So the form you have is kind of fill out a contact form, but you also have space for specifically what their needs are.
Don't at this point. It is, your name, your email address, phone number. There's only a few things that are required, and then there's a space to explain what your inquiry is.
Okay.
I've seen some really nice forms and really nice listings that people have different packages right on their website. I think that's a good idea too, but that's the way I have it at this point, and it's worked well.
We're going to need to wrap up here pretty quickly. I just wanted to bring up one more item here, and that's going forward. We'd like to do this on a fairly regular basis. And in saying that, we also need some topical input as to what we talk about, so that there is a topic for discussion, so that this doesn't turn into kind of a meeting over coffee type situation, that we actually have some meaningful discussion about topics that are relevant and important and can help us move our businesses along. So I'm thinking that maybe it's like a monthly thing that we think about, where we get together and we spend 30, 40 minutes and we discuss the topic. We have some good input, and we come away having learned something from one another. So that's kind of where I am at this point. Thank you to everyone who's participated in this. And it's been very enjoyable talking to you and actually seeing faces and not just email addresses. We'll sign off now. Again, thanks to everyone in the group here that's joined us, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Alan.